He said I could be replaced within a week. But I'd spent 9 years building trust with everyone here, and it took me exactly 17 hours to destroy his 14-year career. That dismissive nod, that "you're nobody" look in his eyes. They thought I'd quietly disappear. But they forgot one crucial thing. I'm an accountant, and I have the keys to every number that matters. My name is Rachel Baines, and for 9 years, I was invisible at Bristol and Loke Capital. Not literally. Of course. People saw me, they just didn't see me. I was the one who arrived at 7:15 sharp every morning, the one whose lunch salad rustled too quietly in the break room, the one who stayed until the janitors started vacuuming around my desk. Senior Financial Analyst, the title said. What it really meant was the person who caught every decimal point error, who reconciled every account, who made sure the numbers sang in perfect harmony while others took the bows. Minneapolis winters are brutal, but our office on the 32nd floor was always suffocating. Not from heat, from the weight of unspoken hierarchies, from the thick cologne of men who believed their MBAs were licenses to treat the rest of us like furniture. The glass walls that were supposed to promote transparency only reminded us who had corner offices and who sat in the cubicle maze. I'd never taken more than 2 consecutive days off. Not when my father died, not when I had walking pneumonia, not even when my sister begged me to join her in Cabo. The company needs me, I'd say. And she'd roll her eyes because we both knew the truth. I needed them to need me. Alan Murtaugh had been CFO for 14 years, 49 years old, with silver fox hair and a smile that made donors write checks. He had this way of clasping your shoulder that made you feel chosen until you realized he did it to everyone, and it meant nothing. His laugh filled boardrooms. His signature authorized millions. His word could make or break careers. Mine, apparently, was meant to be broken. The Tuesday it happened started like any other. Q3 reports, due. Audit prep consuming every waking thought. I'd submitted my promotion package 6 weeks earlier, senior financial analyst to finance director. Natural progression after 9 years. My metrics were flawless. My team trusted me. Even the external auditors requested me by name. At 2:47 p.m., his assistant summoned me. Alan wants to see you. His office smelled like leather and ego. Diplomas from Wharton lined the walls between photos of him shaking hands with politicians I recognized from cable news. He didn't look up when I entered, just kept scrolling through his phone. Rachel. Finally, those gray eyes found mine. Sit, I sat. About your promotion request. He leaned back, fingers steepled. You're good at what you do. Very good, actually. The attention to detail, the consistency, it's admirable. The butt hung in the air like a guillotine blade. But leadership requires something more. Visibility, presence, the ability to command a room. His smile was rehearsed sympathy. You're just not executive material. 9 years of perfect reviews. 9 years of catching errors that would have cost millions. 9 years of being the first one in, last one out. I understand, I heard myself say. I knew you would. He was already turning back to his computer. The thing is, Rachel, good analysts are replaceable. I could post your job today and have 50 qualified candidates by Friday, but don't take it personally. You're valuable where you are. Replaceable. The word followed me back to my desk. It sat on my shoulder as I stared at spreadsheets. It whispered in my ear as I approved purchase orders. It laughed as I stayed until 9 p.m. finishing reports nobody would read. That night, I stood at my kitchen window watching Minneapolis twinkle below. 9 years. A third of my life poured into cells and formulas. And I was replaceable. A cog, a function, a nobody with a forgettable name and sensible shoes. But as I watched my reflection overlay the city lights, something cold and precise clicked into place. If I was so replaceable, so invisible, then no one would see me coming. No one would suspect the quiet woman who ate salads at her desk. No one would guard their secrets from someone who didn't matter. Alan Murtaugh had just made the greatest mistake of his career. He'd dismissed the person who understood his numbers better than he did. The person who had access to every financial transaction, every budget line, every expense report that crossed through Bristol and Loke Capital. If I was replaceable, then I had nothing left to lose. And that made me the most dangerous person in the building. The first anomaly I'd noticed was 3 years ago. A $47,000 consulting fee to Meridian Strategic Solutions. It stuck out because we'd never used them before, and Alan had approved it personally, bypassing the usual procurement process. I'd flagged it for review, but my supervisor told me to let it go. CFO's prerogative, she'd said, so I let it go. Back then, I was still the good soldier. But after that Tuesday afternoon, I started paying attention differently. Our financial system, Deltec CostPoint, was a fortress to most people. But I'd been in it so long, I knew every backdoor, every archived folder, every ghost in the machine. The beautiful thing about being invisible is that IT never revokes your access to anything. They forget you're there, just like everyone else. I started small. Pulling expense reports from the past year during my legitimate work. Nothing suspicious about a senior financial analyst reviewing expense patterns. That was literally my job. But now I was looking with different eyes. The patterns emerged like constellations once you knew where to look. Executive coaching in Aspen every December. Strategic planning retreats in the Bahamas each March. Vendor relationship meetings in Napa Valley every September. Always approved by Alan. Always just under the threshold that required board approval. Then there were the consulting fees. Meridian Strategic Solutions. Apex Advisory Group. Pinnacle Performance Partners. Shell companies that looked legitimate on paper but led nowhere when you searched for their actual work product. No deliverables in our system, no reports, no presentations. Just invoices and Alan's signature. I stayed late one Thursday, nothing unusual there, and pulled the vendor master files. My forensic accounting training from my CPA days was rusty, but it came back like muscle memory. Cross-referencing incorporation documents with state databases, running reverse searches on addresses, following the money like breadcrumbs through a digital forest. Meridian Strategic Solutions was registered to a residential address in Adena. The incorporation documents listed the president as Jennifer Walsh. Alan's wife's maiden name was Walsh. His sister-in-law was named Jennifer. My hands were steady as I screenshotted everything. Each discovery was another brick in the wall I was building. But I needed more. These amounts were significant, but not enough to guarantee destruction. Alan had survived 14 years. He had to be smarter than simple embezzlement. The cash disbursements were where things got interesting. Petty cash requests for client entertainment that reached into 5 figures. All signed by Alan. All lacking proper documentation. The IRS would have a field day with those. But the masterstroke was in the capital expenditures. Computer equipment purchased but never logged into inventory. Office renovations for floors we didn't occupy. Furniture deliveries to addresses that weren't company properties. Each transaction small enough to fly under the radar. But together, we were talking about millions. I worked methodically, like performing surgery. Every piece of evidence copied to an encrypted thumb drive. Every screenshot time-stamped and cross-referenced. Every trail documented with the kind of precision that would make an FBI forensic accountant weep with joy. The most damning discovery came at 11:47 p.m. on a Friday. I'd been tracing a particularly large technology infrastructure payment when I found it. A series of transactions from 2011, Alan's first year as CFO. He'd created a phantom employee, a senior consultant who worked remotely, never attended meetings, never produced anything, but collected a 6-figure salary for 3 years before being terminated. The direct deposits went to an account that, after some digging, traced back to a trust controlled by Alan's wife. I sat back in my chair, the empty office humming with fluorescent lights and the distant sound of vacuum cleaners. 14 years of this. 14 years of skimming, stealing, defrauding, while preaching fiscal responsibility to the rest of us, while denying raises, while cutting benefits, while telling people they were replaceable. My reflection in the dark window looked different now. Still the same sensible clothes, the same forgettable face. But behind my eyes was something Alan Murtaugh had never bothered to notice: intelligence sharp enough to cut, and patience deep enough to drown in. I saved everything to 3 separate encrypted drives. One for me, one for safekeeping, one for what came next. Because this wasn't just about the money anymore. This was about every dismissed employee, every denied promotion, every replaceable person who'd been stepped on by men like Alan. He thought I was nobody. He was about to learn that nobody could be everybody's worst nightmare. The investigation was complete. Now it was time to build the weapon. The deeper I dug into Alan's past, the more the rot revealed itself. Like peeling an onion, each layer more pungent than the last. I found the incorporation documents for all 3 shell companies in Delaware, a state famous for its corporate privacy laws. But Alan had made one crucial mistake. He'd used the same registered agent for all 3, and that agent had been sloppy with their digital footprint. Cross-referencing the addresses led me to a web of connections that would make a spider proud. Meridian Strategic Solutions, registered to Jennifer Walsh, Alan's sister-in-law. She lived in a $2.8 million house in Edina that property records showed was purchased in 2012, 1 year after Meridian started receiving consulting fees from Bristol & Loke. Apex Advisory Group, owned by Thomas Brennan, Alan's college roommate from Wharton. Tom ran a legitimate consulting firm in Chicago, but Apex was a different entity entirely. It existed only on paper and in our accounts payable system. Pinnacle Performance Partners. This one was almost clever. Registered to a law firm that specialized in creating offshore entities. But Alan had used his personal email for one correspondence with them, a rookie mistake from 2011 when he was still learning the game. I found it in an archived email folder that IT had forgotten to purge. The money trail went back 14 years, starting small. A few thousand here and there, test runs to see what he could get away with. But as Alan's confidence grew, so did his appetite. By year 5, he was moving 6 figures annually. By year 10, he'd stolen enough to fund a small country's budget. I created a timeline, a beautiful visualization of greed that showed how the thefts coincided with company milestones. Every time Bristol & Loke landed a major client or closed a significant deal, Alan would reward himself with a bonus the board never approved. When we laid off 15 analysts in 2018 for budget reasons, Alan had just approved $380,000 in fake consulting fees. The personal expense fraud was almost quaint by comparison. First-class upgrades charged as economy. Michelin-starred dinners classified as team meetings with employees who were conveniently traveling that day. A $15,000 Hermes bag purchased in Paris and expensed as client gifts for a client who didn't exist. But the phantom employee scheme, that was artwork. Michael Chen had supposedly worked as a remote senior strategic consultant from 2011 to 2014. His salary, $187,000 annually. His contributions, non-existent. His bank account, controlled by a trust that, after layers of digging through public records and corporate filings traced back to Alan's wife's family, I found Michael Chen's personnel file in our archived HR system. Alan had created an entire fictional life for him. Resume from Yale. Glowing recommendations from companies that had since folded. Even a professional headshot. A stock photo from a website that sold corporate imagery. 3 years, over $500,000. And nobody had questioned it because Alan controlled the narrative. He'd approved the hire, managed the employee, and processed the termination. The only oversight was his own signature. I leaned back in my chair, surrounded by printed evidence. It was 2 a.m. on a Saturday. The cleaning crew had long since gone home. The city below was quiet, just scattered lights from other insomniacs and night shift workers. 14 years. The number kept echoing in my mind, while I'd been building my career one perfect spreadsheet at a time. Alan had been building his fortune one theft at a time. While I'd been grateful for 3% annual raises, he'd been giving himself six-figure bonuses from the company coffers. While I'd been told I was replaceable, he'd been making himself seem irreplaceable by being the only one who understood where all the bodies were buried. Except, now I understood too. And unlike Alan, I had nothing to lose. I thought about all the employees who'd been let go over the years for budgetary constraints. The departments that had been understaffed because we couldn't afford new hires. The bonuses that had been cut because of market conditions. All while Alan lived in his $4 million house in Minnetonka, drove his Porsche 911, and vacationed in places most of us could only dream about. The evidence was overwhelming, damning, undeniable. Any prosecutor would weep with joy at such a meticulously documented case. But I wasn't building this for a prosecutor, not yet. I was building this for maximum impact. For the kind of destruction that would salt the earth where Alan's career once stood. Because being replaceable had given me the greatest gift of all, the freedom to burn it all down without anyone suspecting the match came from my hand. The weapon was loaded. Now I just needed to aim it perfectly. The dossier took me 3 weeks to perfect. 76 pages of meticulously organized evidence, each section building on the last like a symphony of destruction. I formatted it like the financial reports I'd been creating for 9 years. Clean, professional, devastating in its simplicity. Section 1, Executive Summary. A bullet point list of violations that read like a federal indictment. Embezzlement, wire fraud, tax evasion, falsification of corporate records. Each point supported by page references to the evidence that followed. Section 2, The Shell Company Network. Flowcharts showing how money moved from Bristol and Logue to Alan's pockets. Corporate documents, bank records. The interconnected web of family members and friends who'd profited from his scheme. Section 3, The Phantom Employee. Every document related to the fictional consultant, including the smoking gun, emails where Alan discussed Michael Chen with his personal attorney. Accidentally sent from his corporate account. Section 4. Personal expense fraud. A spreadsheet totaling $847,000 in illegitimate charges over 14 years. Each line item cross-referenced with receipts, credit card statements, and the false documentation Alan had submitted. Section 5. The timeline. A year-by-year breakdown showing how the theft had escalated, conveniently aligned with every time the company had tightened budgets or denied employee raises. I bound 5 copies at a 24-hour FedEx office at 3 a.m. on a Sunday. Paying cash while wearing a baseball cap and keeping my face away from cameras. Paranoid? Maybe. But I'd learned from watching Alan's mistakes. The key to perfect revenge is leaving no trace. The timing had to be surgical. Alan was scheduled to present the Q4 budget restructuring to the entire company on October 15th. He'd been promoting it for weeks. His vision for fiscal efficiency that would probably involve more layoffs while he continued to bleed the company dry. On October 14th at 4:47 p.m., I executed the plan. The first package went to the chairman of the board of directors, delivered by courier to his home address. Inside, along with the dossier, was a simple note. "And concerned employee believes you should review this before tomorrow's presentation. The evidence speaks for itself." The second went to Deloitte, our external auditing firm, addressed to the senior partner who managed our account. They had legal obligations once they received credible evidence of fraud. The clock would start ticking the moment they opened it. The third went to the Minneapolis office of the FBI's white-collar crime division. Financial crimes crossing state lines were their specialty, and I'd made sure to highlight every interstate transaction. The fourth went to Rebecca Martinez at the Minneapolis Business Journal. She'd written extensively about corporate fraud and had a reputation for protecting sources. The note to her was different. Embargo until October 16th. You'll understand why. The fifth copy I kept? Insurance. I also created an anonymous Proton Mail account and sent digital copies to 3 board members' personal emails. the ones who actually cared about governance rather than golf. The subject line: urgent, financial irregularities requiring immediate attention. Then I went home, opened a bottle of wine I'd been saving for a special occasion, and waited. Monday, October 15th, started like any other day. I arrived at 7:15, made my coffee, and settled into my cubicle. Alan walked past at 8:30, whistling. He didn't acknowledge me, as usual. Just another piece of replaceable furniture in his peripheral vision. At 9:15, I saw the chairman's Mercedes pull into the executive parking area, unusual for a Monday. By 9:45, 2 more board members had arrived. At 10:10, Alan was called out of the leadership meeting. He walked past my desk looking annoyed but not concerned. He never came back. By 10:30, security was stationed outside his office. By 11:08, IT was inside, presumably imaging his hard drives. By 11:15, people were starting to whisper. The all-company meeting scheduled for 2 p.m. was canceled without explanation. I kept working. Spreadsheets don't analyze themselves, and I had a reputation for reliability to maintain. When colleagues speculated in hushed tones, I offered nothing but polite confusion. "I'm sure it's nothing serious," I said, returning to my monitor. At 2:47 p.m., exactly 4 weeks after Alan had called me replaceable, an email went out from the board chairman. Alan Murtaugh was taking an immediate leave of absence pending an internal investigation into financial irregularities. The CFO duties would be handled by the VP of Finance until further notice. I read the email twice, then deleted it and went back to my expense reports. Just another day at Bristol and Loke Capital. Just another invisible employee doing her replaceable job while the executive floor burned above her. The match had been lit, the fire was spreading, and nobody would ever suspect the quiet woman in the cubicle who'd been here for 9 years, as dependable and overlooked as the office furniture. Revenge, I was learning, tasted like ordinary Monday afternoon coffee and the click of keyboards while an empire crumbled in silence. The office became a theater of whispers and wide eyes. Tuesday morning, forensic accountants from Deloitte arrived with boxes and stern faces. They commandeered the large conference room, papering the windows for privacy. IT personnel scurried between floors with backup drives and evidence bags. The executive floor was off-limits to anyone without clearance. I maintained my routine with monastic discipline. Coffee at 7:20, email review at 7:30, first report by 8 Sacres. When coworkers huddled by the printer trading theories, I stayed at my desk. When the speculation reached fever pitch during lunch, I ate my salad alone. AirPods in, spreadsheets open. "Did you hear?" Jessica from Accounts Receivable cornered me by the microwave Wednesday afternoon. "They found irregularities going back over a decade. Millions, Rachel, millions." "That's terrible," I said, stirring my tea. "I can't imagine how the auditors missed it for so long." "Right? Someone said the FBI might be involved." I made appropriate sounds of concern and returned to my desk. The investigation was moving faster than I'd anticipated. Alan's arrogance had made him sloppy, and sloppy criminals fall hard. Thursday brought reporters. They clustered outside our building like vultures, shooting B-roll footage of our logo while employees ducked past with averted faces. Rebecca Martinez's story wouldn't break until tomorrow. But the other outlets had gotten wind of something big. Our corporate communications team sent 3 emails reminding us not to speak to media. I watched from my window as Alan's Porsche was towed from the executive lot. Asset seizure, probably. The FBI didn't play games when it came to proceeds of crime. Friday morning, October 19th, everything exploded. Rebecca Martinez's article hit the Business Journal website at 6 a.m. Breaking: Bristol and Loke CFO suspended amid $2.3 million embezzlement scandal. She'd done her homework, verifying enough from independent sources to paint a damning picture while protecting her anonymous source: the phantom employee, the shell companies, the lavish lifestyle funded by stolen money. By 8 a.m., it was picked up nationally. CNBC, Bloomberg, The Wall Street Journal. Alan Murtaugh's professional headshot stared out from every business news site in America. The office was chaos. Emergency meetings were called and canceled. Clients demanded explanations. Employees worried about their jobs, their reputation, their 401ks. Through it all, I processed invoices and reconciled accounts. Just another cog in the machine, too replaceable to matter. The board released a statement at noon. They were shocked and appalled by the allegations. A full investigation was underway. They had zero tolerance for financial impropriety. Bristol and Loke's commitment to integrity remained unwavering. Corporate speak for, "We're in damage control mode." At 3:17 p.m., 2 FBI agents in Navy suits walked through our floor. They were collecting documents, they said, speaking to employees who might have information. They stopped at my desk. "Ms. Baines, we understand you work closely with financial reporting. Have you noticed any unusual transactions over the past few years?" I looked up from my screen, blinking as if I'd just surfaced from deep concentration. "Unusual how?" They asked their questions. I gave careful, truthful answers. Yes, I'd seen some expense reports that seemed high, but I'd assumed they were approved at the appropriate levels. No, I hadn't noticed any patterns. I processed hundreds of reports each month. Of course, I'd cooperate fully with any investigation. They thanked me and moved on. Just another interview with another forgettable employee. The real satisfaction came at 4:45 p.m., when I finally allowed myself to walk past Alan's office. The door stood open, a first in my 9 years here. Inside, boxes were stacked on the bare desk. His diplomas had been removed, leaving pale rectangles on the walls. The leather chair that had throne-like quality was just another piece of office furniture now. Yellow evidence tape created a barrier I didn't cross. I just stood there for a moment, remembering the last time I'd been in that room. "Replaceable," he'd said, the word that had started everything. Crazy, isn't it? I turned to find Martin from legal standing beside me, shaking his head at the empty office. 14 years, he continued. You think you know someone, but I guess anybody can surprise you. I guess they can. I agreed. Martin wandered off, but I stayed another moment. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, Minneapolis stretched out below, indifferent to the small dramas playing out in its glass towers. Somewhere out there, Alan was probably huddled with his lawyers, learning exactly how replaceable he'd become. The janitor appeared with his cart, preparing for the evening rounds. I nodded politely and returned to my desk. I had reports to finish before Monday. The company still needed its numbers reconciled, its I's dotted and T's crossed. Bristol and Loke would survive this. They'd hire a new CFO, implement new controls, and move forward. And I'd still be here, invisible and essential, making sure the numbers added up, just as replaceable as ever, just as dangerous as necessary. Saturday evening, a week after the investigation began, I returned to the office. My keycard still worked. It hadn't revoked weekend access for the reliable employees who kept the machine running. The building was tomb quiet, just the hum of servers and the distant ping of elevators carrying security guards on their rounds. I took the stairs to the executive floor. No yellow tape remained, but Alan's office was locked. That didn't matter. I wasn't here to gloat or steal. I was here for something else entirely. The hallway stretched before me, lined with the offices of those who'd made it. Corner views, personal assistants, the trappings of corporate success. I walked slowly, my sneakers silent on the thick carpet until I stood at Alan's door. From my pocket, I pulled a single piece of paper, plain white printer stock, the kind that filled every supply closet in the building, the kind of paper that nobody noticed, that served its purpose and disappeared. Replaceable paper for a replaceable person. I'd debated what to write, a confession, a manifesto, some clever quote about justice, but in the end, simplicity won. 2 words, printed in the same Arial font I used for every report. Replace this. I slipped it under the door. Let whoever cleaned out his office puzzle over it. Let it be filed away with the evidence or tossed in the trash. It didn't matter. The message wasn't really for them. Walking back through the quiet building, I thought about the last 9 years, the overtime hours that bled into my weekends, the vacations I'd canceled to meet deadlines, the thankless precision of making sure every number balanced while others claimed the glory. I thought about every replaceable employee who'd ever been dismissed by someone in a corner office. Every analyst told they weren't executive material. Every administrative assistant treated like furniture. Every IT specialist ignored until something broke. We were the ones who knew where everything was buried. We had the passwords, the access, the institutional knowledge that really ran these companies. We were invisible right up until the moment we decided not to be. The parking garage echoed with my footsteps. My 12-year-old Honda sat alone in the employee section, a stark contrast to the empty spaces where luxury cars usually clustered. I'd driven past Alan's house once, just to see. The for sale sign was already up. His wife had moved to her sister's, the same sister who'd profited from the shell company scheme. I started my car and pulled out into the Minneapolis night. The city looked different now, though nothing had really changed. The same buildings. The same streets. The same people living their lives, unaware of the small earthquake that had shaken one glass tower. My phone buzzed. A text from my sister. Saw the news about your company. You okay? I'm fine, I typed back. Just another day at the office. And it was true. Monday would come. And I'd be back at my desk by 7:15. The investigation would continue. New policies would be implemented. A new CFO would eventually be hired, someone who'd promised transparency and integrity. I'd probably never get that promotion. Whistleblowers, even anonymous ones, had a way of being passed over. But I hadn't done this for a promotion. I'd done it because someone needed to. Because 14 years of theft had funded vacation homes while employees were laid off. Because Replaceable had become a weapon. And I'd decided to show them how sharp that blade could cut both ways. The radio played softly as I drove home. The DJ was discussing the scandal, bringing in experts to analyze how it could have gone undetected for so long. These things require inside knowledge, one expert said. Someone who understands the systems, who has access but stays below the radar. I smiled and changed the station. Let them speculate. Let them investigate. Let them implement all the controls they wanted. The truth was simpler than they'd ever guess. Hell hath no fury like an accountant scorned. The city lights blurred past my windows. Somewhere, Alan was learning what replaceable really meant. Somewhere, FBI agents were building their case. Somewhere, other CFOs were probably reviewing their expense reports with newfound caution. And I was going home to my quiet apartment, to my cat and my books and my ordinary life, anonymous, invisible, replaceable, exactly as dangerous as I needed to be. 3 months later, the news alert popped up on my phone during lunch. Former Bristol and Loke CFO Alan Murtaugh arrested on federal charges. The photo showed him in handcuffs, his silver fox hair disheveled, his Armani suit wrinkled. He looked smaller somehow, like someone had let all the air out of his ego. The FBI had been thorough. Wire fraud, tax evasion, conspiracy, money laundering. 27 counts total. The forensic accountants had followed every thread I'd laid out for them and found even more. Turns out my 76 pages had only scratched the surface. I deleted the alert and went back to my salad. By spring, I'd accepted a position at a different firm. Better pay, better hours, better people. During my exit interview at Bristol and Loke, HR asked why I was leaving after 9 years. Just ready for a change, I said. Time to try something new. They nodded and processed my paperwork. 2 weeks later, I was gone, as quietly as I'd existed there. My desk was cleaned out and filled by someone else within a week. Replaceable to the end. The trial made headlines through the summer. Alan got 12 years federal time, no possibility of parole. The shell company operators, his family and friends, got lesser sentences, but still enough to ruin their lives. Bristol and Loke survived, implemented new controls, hired a CFO from outside with a reputation for cleaning up messes. I never told anyone, not my sister, not my new colleagues, not even my therapist. Some secrets are meant to be carried alone, held close like a weapon you hope to never use again. But sometimes, when I'm training new analysts at my new job, I tell them something important. Never let anyone make you feel replaceable. Your attention to detail, your knowledge, your integrity, these things matter. The people who dismiss you are often the ones with the most to hide. They nod and take notes, probably thinking I'm just another middle manager dispensing fortune cookie wisdom. They don't know about the 76 pages. They don't know about the phantom employee or the shell companies or the note slipped under an empty office door. They don't know that the quiet ones, the invisible ones, the replaceable ones, we're the ones who keep the lights on. We're the ones who know where the bodies are buried. We're the ones who can bring it all crashing down with nothing more than the truth and a FedEx account. Alan Murtaugh learned that lesson too late. 14 years of theft, ended by 17 hours of careful documentation. A career destroyed by someone he'd never bothered to really see. I still have the 5th copy of the dossier, locked in a safety deposit box I'll probably never open again. A reminder of what I'm capable of when pushed too far. A reminder that replaceable is just another word for underestimated. My new office has a window. Not a corner office, I'm not executive material, remember? But I can see the sky, watch the weather change, feel like a person instead of furniture. My colleagues know my name. My boss respects my opinion. Nobody has ever called me replaceable. And if they ever do, well, I've kept my forensic accounting skills sharp. You never know when you might need them, because here's the truth they don't teach in business school. Every company runs on the backs of the invisible. Every executive depends on the people they dismiss. Every empire can fall if the right person decides to stop being furniture and start being the earthquake. I was Rachel Baines. I was replaceable. And I brought down a man who thought he was untouchable. Never underestimate the quiet ones. We're taking notes, and we never forget. Thank you for listening to my story. I'm curious, where are you listening from? Drop a comment below and let me know what corner of the world you're in. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts. Have you ever felt replaceable at work? How did you handle it? Let's discuss in the comments below.